Welcome to this bonus episode of Candid Tiny House that I've prepared for you so that we can wait patiently for season 2 to land. I get to talk with Michael Bartz, who's a podcaster and actor and somebody who has actually built his own tiny house. He built his own trailer, he made it off-grid and suitable for all seasons in Canada. One of the opportunities here in this conversation that I relished was the opportunity to compare North American content with Australian content, because it can be really hard to discern how the environment and the regulations and the tiny house culture in a country can impact a design and which aspects of that design are relevant for Australia and which aren't. We explore lots of the off-grid lifestyle, like what it is to live off-grid, not just, hooray, I did it, I got my tiny house off-grid, but the amount of work and the things that we need to consider if we're making those lifestyle choices, because it's not just a choice about a house, it is a choice about a lifestyle. So we got to compare notes on the different things that off-grid living is. We also get to talk a lot about environmental impact, because a key factor for Michael moving into a tiny house was his ability to reduce his carbon footprint, and that's something that motivates a lot of people to choose a tiny house on wheels, particularly an off-grid one. So Michael's actually used his interest in tiny house building and his interest in lowering his carbon footprint to create his own podcast, which is called In Over My Head, and I highly recommend you go and have a listen to it. It's an awesome set of interviews with professionals to help demystify and break down piece by piece all the ways in our life which we can reduce our carbon footprint. Yeah, so I hope you get a lot out of this, and I hope it helps you distill your ideas about what to look for when you're looking at tiny house content from a different country, and I hope that it helps you really distill your ideas about whether or not you want to go off-grid, in which ways and what kind of lifestyle choices you're signing up for there. And I hope it helps you launch into a further engagement with reducing your carbon footprint and all the ways that we can do that in our lives.
Shannon.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Are you in your tiny house right now?
I'm not actually. No, I was in town for work stuff, so I'm at our studio in town, unfortunately. But it looks like you're in a tiny house.
Yeah, very small.
What are the dimensions? Yeah, it does look pretty small.
Yeah, I was just looking at that and laughing actually, because I was just thinking of comparing the tiny house that you've made to the tiny house that we have, and just thinking about the different regulatory environment that we exist in, you being in Canada and us being in Australia, and how, you know, the limitations of what we need to build to are so different, you know, and how that impacts the design and what's possible within a tiny house on wheels.
Is it stricter there, or?
It looks like it is. Yeah, because I was just doing that research before our conversation, because I was listening to another conversation that you had with the lady from Be Uncluttered, which was a great interview that I enjoyed listening to.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fellow Australian, yes.
Indeed. And I really liked the questions that they were asking you, and I really loved your responses. I felt very connected to your responses. You know, I was thinking, I feel like you're really on a similar wavelength to what we bang on about over here.
Nice.
So
that's
that
good.
was nice. Nice. So to answer your question, our tiny house is 5.4 meters long.
Okay.
And yours is 7.3 meters long.
That sounds about right. Yeah, unfortunately, I go back and forth between metric and imperial, so it's
right.
I know that better, unfortunately. So it's 24 feet by on the outside, 8.5.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a little longer than yours for sure.
Yeah, that's it. And then I was looking up the weight limit, which is really the key dimension, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, height, width, length, it all is responsive to weight. Like, you can't be overweight.
True.
So your weight limit, what's your weight limit again?
Yeah, I've got two 7,000-pound axles. So
I calculated that too. If you've got 14,000 pounds, I've got 6 tons, 6.35 tons.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a weight limit in Australia of a legal limit of 4.5 tons.
Really?
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if your axles can tow more. It's considered like the links of a chain. So the whole trailer has to be rated to that.
Sure.
But really it's about the braking system. And legally we can't go over 4.5 ton without getting into hydraulic braking systems.
Oh.
So yeah.
Yeah, because here it's like even a double axle seems less and less common. They're just getting a little bit bigger, the tiny houses. So usually they're triple axle. So even 7,000 pounds, like a 21,000. So that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's good. I think that's good that you have those safety regulations, but I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think that it's tricky for people in Australia when they're consuming tiny house content from other countries. Because, we get set up with expectations. Like if I look at your wonderful tiny house on the internet and I can see, the length and the size and what you were able to do in that space. If I didn't know about the difference of the weight requirements, I might think that was possible here in Australia, and it might break my heart a little bit to think, sure. Oh, actually I can't, there's a limit to what I can successfully do here in Australia. So I think it's a really good thing to be across.
Oh, so yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of that. And I guess for you guys, it maybe just forces you to stay tiny versus getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that would be how you would do it if you were being really conscientious about it. I think that there is still the imperative to become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that that's partly around housing affordability, that there's people are choosing tiny houses because it's the only viable, affordable option for home ownership.
Yeah, but even within the tiny house world, it's like so the trend generally I'm seeing is bigger tiny houses, triple axles and just a little bit bigger. So I'm just thinking with your weight restrictions in Australia, that would prevent that tiny house getting bigger kind of idea.
You'd hope. They're still getting bigger anyway, and I think people just don't know, or they choose not to know. They choose to ignore it, and it makes me wonder about policing. Like, would anybody come and ping you, for example, or pull you up or bill you for having a non-compliant tiny house on wheels?
Yeah, they could, and I think, as far as I know, at least in North America, things are pretty loose. Like there isn't a lot of coding for tiny houses. Like I had no inspections on mine, didn't have to have any inspections once it's on wheels. And then zoning, like legally, I can't think of any places in Canada that it's legal to have a tiny house. So yeah, I guess to your point, even if you don't really have to stay within the regulations, I guess, because it's not legal anyways. And if someone, regardless of the size, you just can't live that way. So if someone came around and knocked on your door, it wouldn't really matter if it was within the weight limit or not. You're still living full time in an RV essentially. Yeah, so it happens. I've heard of it. I know one fellow who was building a tiny house in the same town that I live in. He has since moved, and yeah, he was building one, and then the bylaw officer showed up and said, "Hey, you can't be living here." And he was renting a spot on the property and living in a regular RV and building the tiny house. And yeah, it was a bit of a scare for sure. That is a possibility that someone could come knocking. And what do you say? We have very few rights that way, at least in Canada.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for talking about that with me, because I think that there is so much aspirational hopes, I guess, for what tiny house living can be, and particularly when us Australians are planning our tiny houses and we're getting content from North America and New Zealand, where they've just got really different regulatory frameworks. We can to get a bit stuck in the thoughts of what's possible, and it can be a really jarring drawback to come back to, well, legalities, what's legal, and what's different here in Australia.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, right? It's like the chicken and the egg thing, where like, do you build the house even if it's not to that standard and prove that it's viable and that people want to do it, or do you wait until the regulations are there? But I feel like if there isn't a demand for it, then they're not going to make it a priority, right?
Yeah, it's tricky.
So I'm more of the ask for forgiveness than permission And I definitely went through that when I was building the tiny house. Like I said, in North America, it's potentially even more fraught with challenges if there is no zoning for it or coding or very little. And so just any tiny house on wheels, you just can't live in full time legally. And so I definitely went through that struggle mentally, mostly, of like, this might implode. This might be a thing that just blows up in my face if I spend all this money and all this time. And then suddenly I can't live somewhere. I have to move on, or I get fined, or it gets towed, or I don't know, all those things that I thought about in my mind that could happen. It was definitely reality, right? But I made the conscious decision, and it was my personal decision to go ahead with it anyways, even though there was a bit of a risk in that lifestyle. And we've been living in the tiny house a year now and have had no issues. We are on a farm outside of town and quite remote in that you can't see us unless you get onto the property. So that helps probably, but we've had zero issues. Even funny enough, I was building the house in a city where I was living, and it was my brother's house, and it was just a regular house. And he was having some furnace work done in the garage, and they had to have the city bylaw officer come by and inspect it to make sure it was good to go. And I'm building the tiny house in the backyard. And he just looks at it and goes, "Oh, that's so cool. Like, we've got a place out in the mountains there. We've got a little RV." And he had no issues whatsoever. He wasn't like asking questions or like, "What are you doing? What is this going to be your house?" Didn't care at all. So I generally, I'm an optimist, and I generally think that people are good and want to help people. And so leaning on that, I'm like, I'm just going to do this and live this way, and we will see what happens. But I think even if someone came by, I would hope that I could say, "Hey, like, look at my house. Look how beautiful it is. Look how much time I spent on it. What are you going to fine me for this? Come on."
Yeah, I hope that they go along with that,
right?
That generosity of spirit that you're offering.
Yeah, just hope for the best. And that's just kind of my mindset generally. Yeah, not to think about the negative, although you want to be realistic with maybe some sort of limitations with the regulations. For me, not to let that stop you from living the way you want to live. Would be
good on thoughts. You. Yeah, so you've sort of made a really deliberate and conscientious sort of inner work, I guess, around that. Like, how much of this risk am I willing to live with, and what do I really think, and how much am I going to let the fear of being kicked out or told that I can't live this way or fined or towed or whatever, you're going to let that determine your lifestyle choices or not.
Yeah, you have to eventually make a choice whether that's a risk you're willing to take, at least right now, the way things are. And honestly, like, again, we are quite remote, but day to day does not cross my mind at all, like not in the slightest, because it's never been an issue.
I'm glad. I'm glad okay. For you. I was living on somebody else's property in the tiny house, and it did play on my mind, that we could get told to leave. Okay. So I think it is. And that sort of does have an element of anxiety for me, the sense of, here I am, I'm setting up, but how long can we stay here? Like, I guess it's just personal, isn't it? Like, how much are we as an individual able to reconcile that risk with the comfort and ease of having a home? So yeah, it's a tricky one, and I think it's personal, and I don't think anybody gets to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do in that circumstance. At the end of the day, you have to live it,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think, like, for us, it's also about the location. If I was in a city or had more traffic, like, honestly, in winter, I think we had one truck come through. I think it was the cousin of the owner who owns the farm. It's like no one comes around. So even in summer, like, it's so private and so remote that way, that that really helps. Because I think I probably would be on my mind more. I'm not sure what your place looked like, but if we were in a higher traffic area or in a city, it might concern me more. Even just people coming around. I think, as much as I like to share the house with people, if a lot of people were constantly kind of coming by and checking it out, that might be a lot too, because we like our privacy as well. So having that balance between where you park it, as far as having your own space, or depending on availability, maybe a higher traffic area. That's, I guess, something everyone has to figure out.
It is, yeah. And it's good to just be realistic about that, and just to have those things in your mind. Like, if I'm going to do this, what sort of property do I need to be seeking out?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's good to know, to plan and know the risks. And even like owning land, eventually we want to own land. hopefully that doesn't have any issues. I don't see why it would, but in parking the tiny house on the land, we'll see. But yeah.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I was thinking about there are some things that are different about building in Canada, and there are some things that are the same about building in Canada. So I would just want to, I guess, cap off the things that are different is the regulatory environment and the weight limits and that sort of thing. But also the cost of building in Canada. Could you want to just run through your estimated costs, please, for your house?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't added up the receipts per se, but I think maybe around $40,000, and that includes we've got an off-grid solar system, solar fridge. A lot of the appliances are propane. Yeah, but that's also doing all the work myself, and I also built the trailer
Wow.
myself, and even that my dad was a welder. He taught me to weld, and because he was a journeyman welder, I'm like, let's build the trailer. Because looking at getting a custom built tiny house trailer, which I would recommend anyone do, obviously. Like that was probably $10,000 in Canadian
Yeah.
at the time. And looking at that, it's like, wow, like, sometimes, yeah, you see articles online, at least I did, seeing, oh, you could build a tiny house for $10,000. Well, maybe. Maybe if you build it out of all recycled material, and in the States, it's very different. They don't have winter in some of their states, right? Like if you're in California, I think Australia, the climate's a little bit more mild. You can maybe get away with single pane windows, or maybe less insulation. But in Canada, you do have to plan for those 4 seasons. But even with that, yeah, we saved a fair bit on the trailer building that, and doing all the labor myself. That probably saved, I don't even know how much, tens of thousands of dollars just in
Yeah.
labor. But yeah, I mean, are things more expensive
Yeah,
in
for
Australia
sure.
then?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Um, Lots of things have impacted that, particularly in the last 2 years. The pandemic has really slowed down building supply,
Sure.
building materials, I suppose. But yeah, I think that there's just a lot of differences. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are DIYers and plenty of people who are buying new materials to make sure they've got really high level of control over the weight and specifications of the materials, and who are doing off-grid are often spending $80,000 and they're doing the work themselves. And they might, they might get like a couple of months of a professional support builder. But most of the labor they're doing themselves, and it's still clocking about 80.
That's quite a difference. I mean, it does add up even here, like all the screws and glue and paint and covering the walls. But yeah, I don't think it would be $80,000.
It's a lot. It's expensive. It's very expensive.
Yeah. And I know, like, I finished my build in 2020. I heard that more recently, yes, the price of lumber is going up, and so I don't know if I built the same house today, if it would be substantially more. I'm not sure, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, but there's some things that are the same. And I was thinking the emotional process of building a tiny house, designing it and building it, and then living in it, our human experience is the same.
For sure.
So I'd love to hear about your emotional process around designing and building and living in a house, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think initially going into it, I was very excited. I had spent about a year doing research and trying to learn as much as I could, and saving money. And then I started the build. Again, I'm very excited. And then in total, it took 4 years. It took 3 years part-time. I was still working a kind of a 9-to-5 job. And so it was evenings and weekends. And then that last year, I just went full-time finishing the build. And yeah, there was definitely an emotional roller coaster at times, where I thought it would take less time than it did, because any of the videos I watched or some of the people I might have talked to said, yeah, it's like 6 months or a year maybe. And so I thought, oh, surely I'll be done by then, but I wasn't. And then it was 2 years, and then 3 years. And there was times where I wanted to maybe give up. And like, there was definitely that in the back of my head, like we talked about, this is not a legal way to live, and maybe I shouldn't even be doing this. But it was also just the sheer amount of stuff that you have to figure out when you're building a tiny house. Like I do think it's more work than a traditional house, because in a regular house, everything is pretty standard. You have your fridge and your oven space, and you have a bedroom and a bathroom. with a tiny house, you have to fit all of that into such a small space. So you really have to be very aware of everything in that space. And so it took a fair bit of planning as well. And it's one thing to watch videos and talk to people and maybe even draw out plans or have someone make some plans for you. But then another thing to actually do the work. And I think that was another reason it took me 4 years. It wasn't that I was putting in 40 hours a week and it takes 100,000 hours. It doesn't, but it was a lot of getting the motivation and the courage up to do the work. Because although I had framed houses briefly after art school, and I had welded and I was generally kind of handy, I'd never really done much plumbing. I'd never installed a window or done much siding or flooring, or just it adds up, right? So figuring out all of those different elements and how they work together in the house, honestly, like I'm actually surprised it works as well as it does. I'm like, well, like we went through winter and everything's still running fine, and like I've never built a house before, and yeah, we worked. I'm shocked that it'd been raining a bunch this past week. I'm like, no leaks in the roof. Like it should, you think, no, of course it'll be fine because I did all the planning and I did everything properly. But in your mind, because I'm not an experienced builder, you have that doubt that, oh, did I do that right? And then it is quite, for me at least, partly it was financial, but also that time. It was like the stakes were so high because I had put so much, first of all, love and effort into it, but also money and energy. And if for some reason there was a failure of some sort, like let's say the roof was leaking, I mean, I would figure it out, but could be very, very stressful. And you could have that experience with hiring a builder for a regular house or a tiny house. But for me, it was that much more evident because I was doing the work. And yes, I could try to make sure that I got everything right, but I'm not a plumber or a gas fitter or any of that stuff. So if I got it wrong, so there was a bit of that emotional roller coaster. But that final year, it was like, I'm going to finish this thing. And I spent as much time as I could. And the closer I got to that finish line, the better I felt and the more motivated I was. Absolutely. And what's nice about building a house is that it's very sequential, good and bad, but I think it's good, where you start with the flooring and then you do the framing and the sheathing and on and on and on. So I kind of had a roadmap of the things I needed to do to finish the house. And so I could kind of see the finish line, and it, those small details added some time, but once I was done, that feeling of accomplishment was just undescribable, how good it felt to build your own house that you live in and is off grid and it's beautiful. I love my house and everything that went into it. That feeling of satisfaction is undescribable.
So good, isn't it? Like shelter building, you've done it, and you've done it successfully.
Yeah, like being like, right? Yeah, not having major leaks or anything, but yeah, like especially in winter or if it's raining, you're just warm and cozy inside. And I love being in the loft. It's just above the living room, and it's cozy, and because of the metal roof, you can hear the rain on the roof, and it's like, oh, it just feels so nice. And to know that I built that, and then to go downstairs and cook a meal or have a shower. I love having a shower in the house, partly because it's just like the water. We haul the water on the farm, and so I haul the water in and I haul the water out, and I have this connection with that water system. And then showering feels so good, and it's self-contained, and I don't know. It's like the water system is interesting because you could build a shed or you could build a structure that shelters you from the elements, but to add those components is another level of complexity, right? How do you get the water in? Where does it go? How do you power it and clean it? And like, it's a whole other thing. So to have that work successfully was another accomplishment. It's like, this is amazing.
Totally is. I love it too. I love it for you. I've got I love that insight of, okay, so we basically, shelter building is you're protecting yourself from all the elements, which means that you keep water out. That's a big deal. If you've got water coming in, you've got a problem. But then when you set up a plumbing system like you're talking about with a shower, you're inviting water into the building, and you don't want that in the walls or in the floor or anything. So just the system, keeping it the way you want it and on tap, and then it's hot water, and then it goes away and it runs away from the house. And Like it's
Mhm.
quite the feat of sequential planning and successful installation that you've invited the most dangerous element in, which is water, and
Right.
successfully, and you got it
Yeah.
out again, and when you wanted it, and it's under your
Contained it.
control. So, I
Yeah.
haven't really had that much of an appreciation of plumbing until I've really started to think it through. It's like,
Right.
right, that's actually really important.
Hmm.
And that feeling of like I kind of get an image when you're talking about all that work that you put in and how much consideration and man hours that it took to get you to there. It's like you're wrapped in all that
Hmm.
love and attention and all that consideration that's created this shelter, this functional, beautiful house that you live in.
Yeah, and a home more than that, right? Like we have shared. I live with my partner Sarah in the house and our three cats. But but yeah, like that sense of home too, right? It's not just a shelter. It's where you live, and you share those experiences, and you have friends over, and you make memories in this space. And so it's so much more than just a house. But also, we touched briefly on aesthetics too. I think having a beautiful home, and especially doing the work yourself, making the countertop or the furniture or whatever, what have you, it just adds another element of love for that
Mm.
space, because you put so much into it, right? Like I've talked about this a bit with other people, that idea of like fast fashion, or changing things up, and cheap furniture, and that throwaway culture. You get so much less of that when you're building your own shelter and your own furniture. You're so much more connected to it because you've invested time and energy, and splinters and cuts and all those things into that thing that you made. You just appreciate that much more. And if someone said you should maybe redo the inside, I would tell them to go away. I'd be like, no, this is the way it looks, and I spent this much time on it, and it's not changing, and that's it. And so yeah, I find that so much more attachment to my home. Even I was chatting with a friend recently, and Airbnb is quite a popular thing here, and a lot of people rent out their tiny houses for Airbnbs. I don't know if they buy them. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. And my friend asked me like, "Oh, would you rent your tiny house out for an Airbnb?" And I said, "Absolutely not." First of all, I wouldn't. I'd have to like be in the house, and that would be just too small. It would be too cramped. You'd have to rent the whole thing out. But I have so much attachment to that space because I put so much time and love and energy into it, that I just right now couldn't think of just giving someone the keys and, all right, bye, we're going to go here and do what you want with it just to make a few more dollars. Like it's so much, yeah, part of my life, that I'm very
Mm.
protective of it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
totally makes sense. Yeah, it's heart, isn't it? And hearth and blood, sweat, and tears. And
And it's good. I love it. I think it's more people should, even if they can't build the whole thing themselves, build as much as they can of their house, especially a tiny house, to have that satisfaction and that buy-in, that they love the space they're in, even if it's not perfect.
I hope that people can think of themselves in that, do that mental exercise of projecting forward into, in those low moments of, it takes more than time and more money and more effort than we expected to build it, and that's hard. But getting yourself there in your mind and knowing that the satisfaction is going to be overwhelming, and the love of the space that you've created is going to be worth it. So yeah, it
Yeah.
could be a little tool to get people through those I want to give up moments.
Right. Yeah. Because yeah, it happens, and it's easy to. I mean, I never really, really wanted to give up, where I was going to throw the towel in, but yeah, it's tough. So I think it's good to, like we talked about, mentally preparing for some of those
Mm.
realities. I think that's absolutely important to talk about. It's in some ways I feel like some of the tiny house culture perpetuates that myth of just spend a summer and slap it together, and for $10,000 you could have a house. Like it might be a lot more work than you think it will be, especially if you're doing it all yourself and following those
Yeah,
regulations as closely as you can. Be prepared for that. And yeah, I guess that's everyone's own journey, and they'll figure it out one way or
totally.
another.
Yeah. It does remind me too, like when you're talking about making the different parts of the house and how much more you value them than the throwaway or change it up or sort of disposable furniture kind of culture that we live in, where we're so disconnected from the materials and the effort that it takes to build something, and then the shipping, everything's so offshore and far away and invisible. It does sort of remind me of harkening back to sort of a bygone era of before, free trade agreements and globalization, where you could just outsource something to the cheapest possible warehouse, where people were actually making furniture, and you'd buy one cabinet and it would be made really well by somebody nearby, and it'd cost heaps of money, and you'd get it and you were done. Because
yeah, no, it's definitely more challenging to source those things now, the way that our system is set up. But yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that was kind of a thought when I was designing the house, like I have a lot of metal in my design, a lot of wood, a lot of natural materials. And environmentally, like you could debate on that sort of where those things come from and the impact of that, but just making things that are well built and made to last, very little plastic, very little kind of that fake stuff that you see in maybe in a lot of RVs. Having as much of that as possible to make the house last as long as possible, right? Back to your example of the furniture or the antiques, that yeah, it just was expensive, but it just lasted forever. And part of that is also the fashion's changing too. Like things were more timeless maybe, or they didn't want to redo their house and renovate and change things up. It was much more permanent possibly. And I like that. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, totally. It just feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's just there's so many benefits environmentally and even cost. There's that idea of the buy me once thing where, yeah, you buy something that maybe up front is a little more expensive, but it's going to last you the rest of your life potentially. And so in the long run, it's actually cheaper and better, and it uses fewer materials. And so there's a lot of pluses to that.
Totally agree. I just want to share this with you. We'll see that.
Oh wow, a train.
Yeah.
That's cool. Oh, so you're right in like a residential area, right?
We're in a residential area, and it's
and your house is on wheels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't live in this house.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's all good, yeah.
This is like our office and my recording studio.
Nice.
And a place for our friends and family to stay. And
you live in a regular house?
I live in a regular
house. Like
a
boring person?
I'm like a boring person. I'm totally boring.
Right.
We've got, when we moved in here with one kid, and I was pregnant with the second kid, and Fred had actually bought the trailer for this tiny house before he met me. So, and it was before there was really any examples of tiny houses on wheels in Australia that we could reference. I mean, probably people had done it, but they were quiet because of course you would be. So so his journey about this was going to be his little activist camp, where he didn't buy into the property market, and if he wanted to move it and support a protest against a coal mine or something, he could tow it and support, but it was only for one person.
Sure.
And so then I came along, and suddenly it had to be for two people, which meant that we had to move the bathroom indoors. And then our story evolved, and we got married and had a baby, and by the time the tiny house was finished, again, it took about 4 years to plan and build.
Nice.
We already had a kid, and so with only one spare loft and a ladder to get to the main loft, there was a limit to how much time I could be properly pregnant, and with two babies in the tiny house. And so it sort of, our life was evolving faster in a way than what the tiny house designs could catch up with. And so, we ended up buying a 2-bedroom house, which is good for the early years of childhood, doesn't match up with the ethics at all, like the hope would be, and our plan is to actually send that one on the way away on the back of a truck, because it arrived on the back of a truck in the 70s, and we'll hopefully send it away and build a off-grid solar passive house that we can sort of have the ethics of it agree with the tiny house.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a good point. And that's something that I've looked at. I mean, my partner and I, we don't have children, but just that room to grow is potentially limited with tiny houses, right? Where, like you said, he designed it for one person, and then now there was two people. And that kind of happened with me, where I was a single person when I started the build. In my mind, I thought, well, maybe I'll build it big enough that we could have two people. But it would have been so much better to design it with my partner, so we could make choices on the space, and maybe would have made some different choices possibly. But it definitely, yes, it's limited in how you can grow, because you can't just add an addition, because you're limited by weight, especially, and size. And so, yeah, it potentially can be a limitation. And I think maybe that's why some people, at least in North America, are gravitating towards bigger tiny houses, triple axles and longer, because maybe there's a bit more room that they could have a child, or have more people over, or just have a bit more space, so
Totally.
Definitely consideration.
Yeah, it's sort of like that attempt to future proof the tiny house.
Sure.
But I like getting the tiny house off the hook for having to be everything.
Sure.
It can be different things for different times, and I'm really glad that we've got the tiny house, because it meant that we could buy a small house, and this acts as like a third bedroom, because
Sure.
it's like an office and a spare bedroom, and it extends the viability of a small house. And then, we've used it as an Airbnb. It was really hard for Fred to hand over the keys. Like,
I bet. Yeah.
Really hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was also a great opportunity, because it was before there were really many other tiny houses on wheels as Airbnb. So it was one of the only ways that people could try out this life. So it was a really great service that we could offer.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was sort of part of this house's journey. So, but I just sort of think, when there's a teenager, they might need a breakout space. And when, it's allowed to be lots of different things. If somebody desperately needs to take up the drums, they can come down here and use that drum kit without bothering the neighbours. So, yeah, I like to think that it can have lots of different uses and doesn't have to be appropriate for all stages of life.
Yeah. And I think, it's for sure. That's true. I think there's, even within the tiny houses, there is still room to expand. And like I said, we may buy property at some point, and we might build a small office or something, studio, like you have on the property, but still have the tiny house where we live in, all the time. So I think it's still, for us, living this way gets you in that mindset of downsizing and keeping things small. And we would just build kind of what we thought we needed, with some room to grow a bit, but we're not going to get this massive house just in case, right? So we're still trying to still stay small, even if we did add maybe a supplementary little cabin or office or something.
Totally. Yeah. Whatever makes it work. I used to say tiny house, big shed,
Sure. Yeah.
Just a place to sort of. Memory kind of burned in my mind of when I was approaching the first winter in Canada when I was living there, but it was actually still autumn.
Yeah.
And I was working in a cafe, and I said, just whimsically looking out the window, and it was raining really heavily. And there was a storm rolling through, and I said to my colleagues, geez, it looks pretty wintry out there. And they stopped what they were doing. They were like, oh God, the Australians in for a ride. They're like, wintry?
Nope. Yeah.
And of course, then it froze for like 4 months, and you couldn't smell anything, and it was like knee high in snow, and everything was so different to what I'd ever experienced before. It was brutal.
Yeah, it can be. And especially, designing a tiny house, or any house, but especially a tiny house, for those elements, like that's another level of design, right? Like when I talked about hauling the water in, I'm taking a tank and hauling it across the farm, and then putting the water into the house. And I'm doing that in sometimes -20. And I was really concerned that it wouldn't work, but it did work, actually. But yeah, just having enough insulation and keeping everything from freezing. And you definitely have to plan in Canada for very cold winters. in the tiny house.
Yeah. How much water are you hauling? You're hauling that like in your arms. You're not
No,
putting it
no,
on the
no.
back of a
It's
truck or anything.
it's 273 liters. So I
Okay.
have a tank, and then actually ended up using a vehicle on the farm to haul it.
270. How long does that last you? 273 liters.
Yeah, not including our laundry, an average about 10 days.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Yeah, short showers, and yeah, I got very efficient at doing dishes, very efficient at like recycling the water and stuff. But yeah, I find that's another thing is when you haul the water, I don't know, for me at least, like you can conserve water in a regular house, but when you have to imagine that it usually takes about an hour at least to fill the tank, which is not a lot, but it's an extra thing that you have to do. When I
Mm.
think about that, I am so much more conscious about how much water I'm using because I don't want to fill it. I don't want to do it. It's not fun. I never want to do it. So
So you just want to stretch it out, right?
yeah, as
Stretch
much as
out
you
that
can. Like,
batch.
can I shower at other people's houses? Can I shower at your house? No, but yeah, just conserving water as much as we can makes it go further. And the fewer times I can fill it, the better.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining, like in Australia, we would just run a hose, like a garden hose from a main house, plug it into the tiny house, or have a water tank right next to the tiny house, like we do, and so we'll just fill it from the roof's rain.
Mm-hmm.
The big house's roof anyway, because the tiny house doesn't catch enough water
Sure.
because it's so small.
Yeah.
So, but I'm imagining that your piping can't be exposed because it would just freeze up and burst everything.
Yeah. And in a normal like house in Canada, it's under the ground, I think 2 meters or so. But yeah, that was a consideration because yeah, in the summer we absolutely could run a line from a nearby house. First of all, but we had to have like at least I thought we should have a like food grade, like drinking water type hose, not just a regular garden hose. And those are a bit more expensive. And so I didn't want to get one of those, but also I thought like, I want to get used to hauling the water even in summer because winter is going to come and then it's going to be an even bigger pain because I've been used to just running the garden hose all summer and now I've got to haul this thing. So I thought might as well just haul it all the time and be used to that. So although we could do that, I still haul the water just so I'm ready for winter. And
You're like winter fit. You're like match
right.
fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could, but to me, it was just, it also, there was a bit of a learning curve, I'll call it. Like I got so the tanks are, like I said, 273 liters and I've got 3 of them. So I've got a freshwater tank and a gray water tank, and then a third tank to fill that. So they're all the same size. But as far as like logistically, how do I get that there? And I put it on top of the truck. It's got a roof rack. I put it on top there. And there were just little things that I adjusted after I was filling it, like time and time again, little changes that I made to make it more efficient, to make it work better. And so those little things I could not have planned for until I just tried it and went, oh, this actually works better, or I should have done this. And so by doing that throughout the summer, it got me ready for winter, because if I was trying to figure those things out in -40 and slipping in the snow and like, I'm done, So it was a good way to prepare and to figure out what we needed to do, even just in that one example of the water, getting ready for winter.
How do you heat water?
I've got an on-demand propane water heater.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Which works pretty well.
Good. I imagine you've got a wood fire. I don't actually know if you've got a wood fire heater in your house.
No, I went with propane, so I do have a propane stove, fire,
right?
A heater rather. It just at the time that's what I thought would work the best, and it is very convenient. I'll tell you that. The one fellow I mentioned earlier who was building one, he put in a wood stove, and it was one of those really, really small ones. I don't remember the brand name. It doesn't matter. But to me, it was like, I don't know if this has been your experience in that house, like to cut the wood to such a small size would be a lot of work. And I don't know, I just didn't want to. I just wanted to set the thermostat and not worry about it. So
yeah,
that's what I chose to do. In my plan, like I was chatting with a fellow who builds tiny houses, and he talked about redundancies and how, it's good to have a couple of different systems in your build, So let's say I had a problem with the furnace and it stopped working. What do I do in the middle of winter? I have no way to realistically heat it. I could use electric heat, but having a wood stove, even as a backup, wouldn't be the worst idea. I don't really want to cut a hole in the roof at this point, so I probably won't do that. But I like the idea of a wood burning stove. I think, yeah, day to day, I'm not sure what your experience has been, but that would be another thing to do that I maybe couldn't squeeze in, because I find hauling the water, checking the batteries with the solar, there's those few things you have to do when you're off grid. Even checking the propane level is not as big a deal, but uh, and then heating the space with wood for me was just another thing to add to the list that I didn't really want to do, so I didn't.
It's a good thought ahead of time. How much time is it going to take to
Right.
be off grid? I didn't appreciate that until we did it. Now this is a
Sure.
fossil fuel free house, right?
Nice.
So we've got wood stove. Sorry, wood fire is actually heating the water as well,
Nice.
which meant that we needed to collect, cut, store dry, and light the fire, like with the firewood, just to get hot water. And that's, in the summer, it's fine because it's on the roof and it's
Sure.
collecting sun, and a warm day will warm it to bathable. But in the winter, we were needing storage for that wood and access to getting the wood, and then making sure that it didn't get wet before we burnt it, because if you burn the wood to heat the water or to warm the house, and if the wood goes, if it can't light because it's wet, you just got a house full of smoke and it's bloody cold and awful.
Yeah.
So it's a real setup for failure or for exasperation, if there's like physical barriers to being comfortable and warm. So that was a real deal breaker for me, and I didn't quite appreciate how much, yes, when you're living off grid in this sort of extreme way with no fossil fuels, no conveniences like a thermostat like what you've arranged for your tiny house, I found that I spent a lot of time working for the house instead of working for the man.
Sure.
And I also lamented that I wasn't actually very good at working for the house.
Okay.
I was actually better at working for the man because
Yeah.
I had emotional skills, and I was in sort of like a pink collar
Sure.
job that I got paid for. And I was actually better at spending my time on that than I was at, doing the full homesteading thing. And I got better at it, but I was still working. Like, it still took a lot of time to run the house.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. It's something that people need to probably consider. Like that, I like that, working for the house or for the man. Yeah, that's absolutely a thing, because both my partner and I, like, I'm an actor and she works as a microbiologist. And yeah, like, you have things to do during the day if you want to work and be productive. And wouldn't you rather put your time into that? Because yes, living off grid, especially like you guys are, and the homesteading thing, like, that's a lot of work. Even growing a big garden or other things, it's just, yeah, you spend a lot of time living, like, as opposed to working. And I mean, there's a trade-off, right, where some people might be working in a job that they don't like just to pay for that big house and all those expenses. So maybe for that person, they'd rather be working for the house than working for the man. But yeah, for people who love their career and want to keep working, it's a decision to make, for sure. Is how much time do you want to spend maintaining your house? And I think people living, I call it conventionally, um, you don't realize how easy it is. I think, no, I don't even think, it's a fact that we have more free time and leisure time than we have ever before in the history of the world, because of modernity and the conveniences we have, because we don't have to chop the wood and haul it and store it and everything else. So those conveniences, yes, they come at a cost, maybe an environmental cost or just a financial cost, but it's allows people to live their lives and not have to worry about hauling water. They just turn the tap on. And in some ways that's nice, I guess. On the other side of things, living the way we do, I like that self-sufficiency in a way. I remember when I was still building the house. So I built it in the backyard of the house I was renting, which I mentioned was my brother's house. And at one point, the power went off in like a quarter of the city. There was some sort of storm or something. All the power went out, and we noticed that shoot, the power's out. So we went to the tiny house and turned things on because it was running on solar, and we went back to our evening and enjoying our evening. And I can imagine if you had flown over, you would have seen like all this darkness, and then you see this little light coming out. And so I like, to an extent, being self-sufficient, because when things stop working, you can potentially fix them or alleviate it. And you're not just calling someone going, gotta call a plumber, I gotta call an electrician, I don't know what's going on. And you're relying on someone else. To a certain extent, I like being self-sufficient because it gives me more, more empowerment that I can take care of myself if I need to.
Yeah, totally agree. We've had moments like that too, where the power's gone out down the street or something, and we go, oh, all right.
Right.
We've got a fridge running already in the tiny house, and with the batteries coming off everything, it's fine. We've got the internet, we've got the battery power,
right.
yeah. It is a moment of succeeding, going like, yeah,
right.
We got this.
Yeah, feels good.
It does. I wanted to ask you about visitors in your tiny house. How's it gone, having visitors in your tiny house?
Like as far as like overnight visitors or just people over? Or?
Just both.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we haven't had a lot of people over because of the pandemic. That is loosening up right now. But actually, so I was quite active on couchsurfing.com before the pandemic. I had hosted probably 40 some people from around the world. I had used it when I was traveling and loved hosting people. And I've actually really missed that. But we have hosted a few people, and yeah, the house is big enough for two people comfortably. Once you start adding a few more, it does get a little small. I built the living room area to double as a queen size guest bed. And so we can convert that into a guest bed, and that works great. Even just setting up as like a big couch, we've done that. So we've had, a couple, 2-3 people over, and setting up as kind of a big couch is kind of fun. So I've noticed that we can do it and we enjoy having people over, but it does get a little tight, especially in the winter. I found in the summertime, just naturally, like I didn't put in air conditioning in the tiny house, partly for environmental reasons and for the power supply and such. And the siding is black. And it got pretty hot when we had that heat wave last summer. It was 40 degrees Celsius. And so we just tented outside. Actually, we just went outside and tented most nights. And it was, we just went with it. We adapted. And so when we have people over, especially in the summer, we gravitate towards the fire pit, towards the table outside to chat, mostly in the winters when we would go inside. And so kind of just adjusting depending on the weather, but overall it's been good.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we have to manage the heat in summer more than the cool in the winter. So yeah, that's our sort of point of difference. So next time you're building a tiny house, come to Australian content for keeping that cool.
Yeah.
We're managing that all the time. Yeah, it's a bit tricky in a tiny house when you have to live up or sleep up, and you've got the stratification.
The loft gets a bit warm, but actually, if I thought about that, I probably, because I've got one window in the loft that opens, and in hindsight, I probably should have had both windows open.
Yep.
That way they would have allowed more ventilation. I thought there would be more airflow up there, but it's not great, but it's okay. And I think with all kind of the things we've talked about in designing your own house, I've really learned to be forgiving in my limitations, right? Like there are thousands and thousands of things you have to consider, and even just heat and where you live and your siding and what does that look like. There's so many things to consider. Like you're maybe not going to get it right the first time, right?
Yeah.
When you're designing your house, that it's okay if maybe something didn't work out. And I find that we adapt as much as we can, right? And we roll with it, and it's okay. So it works most of the time, and it can't be perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah, good on you. It's a good sort of position to occupy inside yourself. Like permission to fail. It means you're not going to stop yourself from moving forward. You sort of fail forward in some moments. You just have to go, yep, not perfect, moving on.
Yeah, because the opposite just freezes you up. That happened when that fellow I mentioned who builds tiny houses. When we were talking about redundancies, I thought, I didn't put that in my tiny house, and I didn't think about thermal mass, and I didn't think about this and that. And there were so many elements that I maybe didn't put into the house that he had thought about. It made me feel very bad about my house and that it wasn't adequate.
Mm.
And looking back, that's very, very silly. It was a natural thing to feel, but yeah, it's like, no, of course not. Like anyone who builds their own house, regardless of the level it is in off-gridness or technology or what have you, anyone who does that is successful because you've made your own home, your own shelter, and not to compare yourself to the neighbor. Like that's the point of living tiny anyways, not to keep up with the Joneses. Now you're keeping up with the tiny house Joneses. It's a never ending cycle. So just be happy with what you have and where you're at and your skills, and do the best you can.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Totally agree. I wanted to ask you about your environmental like learnings and where being in the tiny house sets you up for the future. Because I've wondered about like I'm really really enjoying listening to your podcast, the In Over My Head podcast. I love it. It's such a really intellectually rigorous look and breakdown at like what is low footprint living really, and it is overwhelming. And I really like it that you've taken that how crushingly overwhelming the climate catastrophe is on a personal level, and then thinking, okay, well, now what are we going to do about it? I don't know. Who are the experts? What do we do? So, you know, I'm just thinking you've done this big thing of getting yourself into a tiny house that's off grid. You've eliminated a lot of your climate footprint, your carbon footprint, I suppose, by doing that. I'm interested to know, now that you're here and you've been doing it for a year and you're also interviewing all these experts in how to manage climate catastrophe, what's your perspective at the moment, like looking forward from this position of living in a tiny house? Is it becoming clearer on like what now, what next, what can you step into?
On a personal level, yeah, I think especially talking with the experts I've been talking with, going into it, I genuinely felt that over my head, that overwhelmed feeling, and learning from them and seeing the commonalities between the conversations and the various ways that I can be empowered. I think, yeah, I'm more hopeful, and I just feel more educated on a personal note. And I'm glad that you're enjoying the show and getting something from it. And so I feel like I'm gaining those tools to effectively address the problem, and learning that, maybe it's being off grid necessarily isn't always the best thing. And you could be on grid and still be lowering your environmental footprint. And so I think I'm doing the best I can with the tiny house. And we are keeping our carbon footprint low, and living in the tiny house forces us to not buy as many things and to just lower our consumption generally. And like my first guest, Kathleen, talked about, when you live tiny, there are those kind of compounding factors where you also recycle more and you reduce your waste, and it just adds on. So I find that very much true for us. And yeah, overall, I'm feeling generally hopeful about the whole thing, that we can solve it, and we can do better. And I think what I'm also learning about is kind of those, you talk about a personal level, but also how do we solve this on the more societal level? And I'm glad that you find it intellectually rigorous conversations. I try my best. And I think I'm learning is the bigger picture thing, is that yes, we can all reduce our individual carbon footprint, and that's a good thing to do. But looking outside of that, how do we reduce it on a global scale? And that's what's going to be required. And so that's good to know. And it is another big task to undertake. But knowing how to effectively address the climate crisis empowers me to do something about it. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. Thank you. Yeah, because I mean, that's what we need, isn't it? We need more empowered individuals who are taking it seriously and following up their knowledge with action, because it's way too easy, unfortunately, to feel overwhelmed and like the government's not doing enough. And that's where the really big changes could happen on that sort of meta scale. And so then when it comes down to micro, it can feel like collapse, of like, oh, well, we're doomed. Bloody hell, what am I going to do? So it's really great that that your exposure to all this knowledge, because you're, you know, rigorously seeking it out, what do we do? Like, what are the impacts of water, and what are the impacts of EVs? And, you know, like, really just figuring it out, then at least then we have hopefully more individuals who are empowered to do something and to feel hopeful that there is a future pathway. It might be a narrow pathway. We have to eliminate all the other options of, you know, interesting and tantalizing ways of moving into the future. But like, if there's a 1 or 2%, you know, pathway that we could figure out that does actually sustain human life on the planet, then that would be the path to take, presumably. I think about it a lot.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's something I'm learning in talking with the guests and doing research about this topic. Yeah, it's like the big one is decarbonization of our electricity grid is a huge one, right? And that's like, that would solve a lot of problems. And that's not necessarily people just like yourself or myself living off grid in a tiny house. So yeah, it's like, it's in some ways it's simple, but in some ways it's very complex. And but you can do both, right? I think empowering people is good, because otherwise, yeah, you would just feel overwhelmed and you wouldn't do anything. But it's also not about just passing the buck and saying, well, the government will deal with it. I think you do need to have that personal buy-in too. And for us, living tiny, downsizing, and trying to reduce our footprint, if nothing else, I'm hoping to inspire people that, look, I'm a regular person and I'm doing this, so you can do something too. And maybe that's stopping driving, or maybe that's whatever it is, never buying new anymore, whatever it is for you. I think, yeah, empowering people to take action and effective change, right? Because I think part of feeling overwhelmed is also just, I don't know, that was the feeling I had. That's the whole show, is I don't know if this is effective. Like, I've drastically altered my lifestyle, downsizing. I don't know if it's making a difference, right? And I was curious to find out if it was. And I think that's a common feeling, whether it's recycling or your consumer purchases or anything. Because I find in doing research for the show, I kind of laid out the different seasons that I wanted to cover. And environmentalism and reducing your footprint really covers every aspect of your life, right? The things you buy, the way you get around, the food you eat, like, it's all encompassing, because our lifestyles are why we are in a climate crisis, because of our consumption and how many people we have and such. So there's definitely a lot to cover, but there's definitely also some big things that we could be doing that could make a big change, I think, relatively quickly.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing the other seasons.
Right. One thing I really want to cover is like life and death. That's going to have to be at the end, but like the environmental footprint of cremation or burial or things like that.
Yeah.
So I really want to cover that. But I got to wait till the end, maybe.
Don't mind till the
right.
Does that mean that you do your last season on death?
Death.
And then gold.
That's the
just
end.
feels a little bit.
We'll see. I might work it in somewhere else.
You could. Yeah. Why not?
Do whatever I want. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like every aspect of our life impacts the planet. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about all of it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. Just going through, systematically breaking it down one by one.
Trying.
It's great. Thanks so much, Michael. It's a pleasure and an honor to chat with you. I really love it, how much you're living your ethics, and you're walking your talk, and making that accessible and available to other people, so that it makes it a bit easier for everybody. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Shannon. It was great chatting with you.
So thanks for listening to that great bonus episode on Candid Tiny House with Michael Bartz from Canada. I hope that you check out his podcast. It's called In Over My Head. As you heard, it's full of rigorous conversations with professionals about what we're doing to reduce our carbon footprint and what impact it's having. So I hope that that's really inspiring to you, to help you make grounded personal choices around what you can do to support the planet at this critical time. As always, if you want any more information about tiny house living, tiny house building, compliance, regulations, risks, please head over to our website, fredstinyhouses.com.au. Check out Tiny House University with our online course. They're fantastic resources, and I know that they'll save you heaps of time and money and risk. This episode was recorded on Jara country, and I pay my respects to the Dja Dja Wurrung people whose sovereignty was never ceded and the treaty was never signed. I'm really looking forward to bringing you season 2 of Candid Tiny House, so stay tuned for that. And until then, stay candid.